49% of the time, the storm reports that say this size hail fell at that address has been accurate. You can flip a coin on whether or not it's true. If your roof doesn't have any of those particular things on them, then they cannot determine the size of the hail that fell from indentations. You guys following me, or have I lost you? I did math with roofers in a room. You're on the top of a hill, you roll a ball down the hill. Someone in the middle of that hill picks up that ball, throws it through a window, breaks the glass cuts a woman inside. What is the proximate cause? Was it you rolling the ball down the hill, or is it the person that picked up the ball and threw it through the window? Have you ever seen a negligent windstorm? Does anybody know any manufacturer of shingles that requires you to hand seal shingles when you install them with the racking method? Don't hide from wear and tear or improper installation. Be the first one to say something about it. They started off by giving a baseline. The shingles were 0 years old. This top one is a 3-tab fiberglass. I think it's this bottom one is the architectural shingle. And this is a organic shingle, so we're going to ignore the middle line. So at 0 years and 0 months, they shot it with 1 inch and 1 1/3 inch crescent-shaped hail. I don't know what that is. And I don't know why they did a third, but that's what they did then. When they shot it again later on, they did 1 inch, 1 1/4 inch, and 1 1/2 inch. They didn't do 1 1/3 inch crescent shaped anymore. So their data is skewed already. They don't have a baseline to know anything. What's the point? So let's just assume that 1 1/3 inch is the same as 1 1/4 inch for a second, I guess. Crescent shaped. It's probably not a full sphere, so maybe it doesn't have the same impact energy as a full sphere would. I don't know. Doesn't make sense. They shot it 12 times. They got 2 fractures with 1 inch ice on a brand new shingle. Whoops. 1 1/3 inch, they got bigger, and they had only 1 fracture from that 3-tab. That doesn't make any sense. And with the architectural, they had no damage. So a little bit of an anomaly to happen when it's brand spanking new. And then they were supposed to go and shoot it at 7 years, which is why all these say 7 on them, but they skipped that year, and they're like, I forgot. And they went back and they shot it at 10 years old instead. And that's when they decided to end the study, because apparently they couldn't keep up with it. So they brought the shingles in and they shot them one more time at 10 years old. They're supposed to shoot them at 11. So this is the age of the shingles. They were 11 years and 2 months for this 3-tab, 10 years and 11 months for the architectural shingle. And they shot it with different sizes. Because they didn't shoot it less than 1 inch, how would they know that less than 1 inch would not cause damage to a 3-tab? The rule of thumb is that it takes 1 inch hail or larger to cause damage to a 3-tab shingle. How the fuck would they know if they didn't even test smaller than 1 inch? Does that even make sense? They had 0 fractures at 1 inch and 6 at 1 1/4. So they're saying, all right, we'll cheat it and we'll say 1 inch is the smallest size possible. But remember, they're only looking for functional damage the way they define it, which has to have a fracture or a bruise. And it's only 11 years and 2 months old. What if your roof is 15 years old? Would this apply? Why are they using the same rule of thumb? What if it's a different brand shingles? Are all shingles the same? How do you even know what this was? Would malarkey be different? Probably. What if you're in a different climate zone? What if the hail didn't fall at terminal velocity? There's too many variables involved here. If there's any wind at all, this is completely negated. Their rule of thumb is based on this study, which has 10 data points. You would fail in middle school if you had 10 data points on a scientific study. I sound like a freaking pubescent teenager right now. I keep squeaking. Anyway, architectural shingles, They shot at 1¼ inch, they got no damage, but 1½, they got 6. So they said that 1¼ inch was the smallest hail possible to cause damage to it. That's where they got that from. Yeah?
Don't architectural crews a lot easier than rehabs, though?
Depends on where you shoot it. They didn't actually say if they shot the upper laminate or the lower. I think they only shot the lower. But I don't know. It is thicker. Thicker ones usually have a lot more impact because it's squishier. It can deflect a little bit more. But we don't know what brand that was or if it was a 30, 35 year. This was from the 80s. These shingles were manufactured in 1986. Do you think the shingles have improved since then? They've definitely changed. Should any of this even apply? If there's any wind at all in that hail event, any at all, then the rule of thumb should be thrown out the window all by itself. If we start including all kinds of damage and not just functional, then this should be thrown out the window. It's bullshit. That's where it all comes from. 10 data points has established that people are denied claims for hail damage because of 10 data points. And they try to find ways to say that the hail was less than 1 inch or less than 1¼ inch, depending on the type of shingle you have. They will go out of their way to identify the size of the hail being smaller to say that because it was less than 1 inch, that we're not looking at hail damage. It must be wear and tear. It must be defective materials because hail would not have caused damage to these unless it was defective or really old. And that's where they get that wear and tear denial from. And maybe they're right. Wear and tear can be part of the loss, but they still owe for the hail. So they want to say that it's smaller. And here's your threshold sizes that they came up with. This is all the bullshit that they've got. And they say heavyweight asphalt shingles and wood shingles are 1¼ too. It's weird. Actually, this isn't. I think I put the wrong thing up here. This is from something else. Whatever. All right, so how do we determine the size of the hail that fell? We can look at the storm reports, which are 49% accurate according to recent studies. 49% of the time, the storm reports that say this size hail fell at that address has been accurate. You can flip a coin on whether or not it's true. That's crazy. Well, we can determine the size of hail, apparently, by the burnish marks, the spatter marks. Splatter for some of you people that haven't taken my classes. Whatever you want to call the mark left behind by hail when it hits something dirty. You measure the width of that, right? That's supposed to give you an idea of the size of the hail that fell. That came from one study with 3 data points. Here's that one. It's called Crenshaw and Kuntz, hail sizing it up. You got your splash mark diameter and your splash mark length. We're going to ignore the length. It doesn't matter. The diameter is the width of it, basically. So 1 inch hail was fired at a metal panel, a panel they took off of like a rooftop AC unit kind of a thing. And they fired 1 inch hail one time at a metal panel and measured the size of the spatter. And they got some number in very obscure, I don't know. What number do you think that is? 0.5? 0.3? They don't really tell you. 2 inches, it's almost 2 inches. 1 inch would be here. It's like halfway, so maybe 0.5. So at 1 inch, the spatter mark is half the size of the hail. At 2 inches, it's almost the size of the hail. At 3 inches, it's above 4. 3 hailstones. 3 data points. And then they averaged it. And they measured this a weird way. So you have an indentation, there's an inner indentation diameter and the overall diameter. They're measuring this. Getting 2 people to agree where this line starts is impossible. But that's what they're trying to measure. Can you tell where that indentation diameter, the inside, starts on that image? It's a very gradual progression. It's hard to see where that changes. They make it seem like it changes abruptly, and it doesn't. You can't get two engineers to agree on what size the indentation diameter was on any of those. But that's what they're measuring for indentations to determine the size of the hail. And then they're using another chart, very similar to the one with the spatter. And they shot these different materials that are common on roofs. And based on those materials being shot at, they've been able to determine from its indentation diameter what size hail would have hit it. If your roof doesn't have any of those particular things on them, then they cannot determine the size of the hail that fell from indentations. Does every roof have that? No. They make it seem like any indentation in metal is able to make some kind of a determination. Now, granted, it's a bullshit determination even if they could, because there's one data point per item on this list. One. So here's the data from that. There's not much, but they do worse. All right, so let's say we got 3/8 inch diameter hail. Spatter was 3/8 inch diameter. Let's see what we got. Aluminum. Oh, what did I do? 1.5. I think we're here. So let's say parapet wall caps, copper, 16 ounce, hit at 90 degrees straight down, meaning terminal velocity. Well, 1 inch hail size apparently causes a 0.6 inch diameter spatter mark. Parapet caps, galvanized steel, 0.4. That's where that one diagram that I showed you came from. There's our 0.4. You said 0.5, maybe 0.3. That's 0.4. But that's we got 1 inch hail, a dent size of 0.4, a ratio of dent to hail is 0.4. So if you were to try to figure out the size of the hail, you would measure that dent and multiply or divide that by 0.4 to figure out the size of the hail. And that gives you a dent multiplier. So you could just multiply by 2.5. So 1 inch hail multiplied by 2.5, or 1 inch diameter. Bloody hell, I can't even figure it out. I got some of this shit. Got ½ inch spatter multiplied by 2.3 coefficient is 1.15 inch hail. The 2.3 comes right here. So here, this is the one I was using. Mechanical unit. This is the mechanical units are the spatter marks. I figured out where I'm at again. They shot 1 inch hail. The spatter mark made 0.44 inch spatter, right? So that's a 2.3 coefficient. So we can measure the size of the spatter times 2.3 to figure out it was 1 inch hail. And here's this 2 inch hail. They got a coefficient of 1.1, and the 3 inch hail has a coefficient of 1. And instead of trying to get you to multiply by 2.3 when it's small, they just took these numbers and created an average of 1.5. And so if it's 1 inch hail or 1 inch spatter mark, they're going to multiply it by 1.5 instead of 2.3. And that creates a smaller hailstone than what actually fell. Because they averaged 3 data points, and it's all over the fucking map. And so that coefficient makes no sense. But they wanted to have a rule of thumb for people. So 3 data points became 1 average coefficient, which makes the hail smaller than it actually was, even according to those 3 data points. And this is what engineers are taught. This was in an forensic engineer manual. So they're supposed to multiply it by 1.5. If you had 0.375 inch spatter mark, multiply it by the actual coefficient they had, it would be a 0.86 inch hailstone. But if you use their coefficient, it becomes 0.56 inches. And they could say that it was smaller than it was. And they just want to be able to say it was less than 1 inch because then it could not possibly have caused damage, so therefore it must be wear and tear. You guys following me or have I lost you? I did math with roofers in a room. All right, let's start talking about some wind. Do you guys know what that image is?
Heat signature on the roof.
It kind of looks like heat signature, but it's not. So they took a model of a roof, they stuck it in a wind tunnel, and they put it on a Lazy Susan. They spun it around. They hit it with wind from every direction, and then put the pressure differential from every direction of hail or of wind on one image. All the red zones are the worst possible areas, the most pressure differential. So Haig says that you will have wind damage at the eaves, rakes, and ridges before anywhere else. And it's because of studies like this. The problem is they recreated this image from a different study that had these giant red blobs in the middle here. And now they're muted to make it look like they weren't really that red after all. Haig recreated this image to make it better for them. So eaves, rakes, and ridges. If we can, you can actually see these little color changes here. You might have wind damage in the middle of the roof here and nothing on this back eave. And Haig might say that that's wrong. The reality is the eaves, rakes, and ridges rule is true for a simple up and over or a four-sided hip. If there's any complexity to the roof at all bets are off. Wind does weird shit. There's vortices all over the place. Anytime it has to change direction, it speeds up. Figuring out on site what wind would do would take AI. Haig engineer can't figure that out. Here is a video from a hurricane I went to. I hope it plays. It's not going to let me play it, but that video is of Hurricane Ida from Homa. I was pointing cameras at different roofing materials. That's an asphalt shingle roof, and the place where the shingle started pulling up first was around the chimneys on all 7 roofs. Why would that be? Anytime wind changes directions, it speeds up. It's changing direction around that, but it's also got flashing there. And you're not supposed to put fasteners for the flashing, right? So they're supposed to be hand sealed down. Well, sealant wears out. So it is the most susceptible area. And the most susceptible areas are the areas that are going to have uplift first. And it happened at the chimneys. Now, if I was on that roof with a Haig engineer and there was no damage to the eaves, rakes, or ridges, but there was around the chimney, what would they say? Mechanical. Something like that. Improper installation, maybe. Deteriorated sealant. Reality is, if they keep saying what occurred as a result of the improper installation, the undamaging winds, they're non-damaging because they didn't damage the eaves, rakes, and ridges. The undamaging winds were able to cause damage because of improper installation, because the sealant degraded. Then wear and tear was a part of it. If you say it first, they still have to say something about the wind. And they're just not mentioning that the wind still came in and did something, because they only have to name the proximate cause. This is not even going to, oh, thank you. All right, so that's the issue. Donan wrote an white paper on wind. I got 10 more minutes. This is probably the best part of this entire speech. Donan wrote a white paper on wind. And in that, they explained what it is that they're supposed to do when they go out on site. Proximate cause is an important legal term when studying whether or not wind is the true peril of a loss. And it is therefore important for anyone studying wind damage to understand it as well. They're talking about proximate cause, which is a legal term. An engineer is writing about a legal term that has to do with policies in a technical paper about wind. And they say, and they give this example, you're on the top of a hill, you roll a ball down the hill. Someone in the middle of that hill picks up that ball, throws it through a window, breaks the glass cuts a woman inside. What is the proximate cause? Was it you rolling the ball down the hill, or is it the person that picked up the ball and threw it through the window? According to them, proximate cause is the cause of loss that starts with a negligent act and continues through a chain. They specify that a negligent act that produces the injury is required for there to be any proximate cause named. Have you ever seen a negligent windstorm? Liam has, apparently. Yeah. Fucking thing didn't do what you expected. I mean, maybe the government is creating hurricanes. I don't know. That would be negligence. So they're always looking for a negligent act. It gets worse. Therefore, one may frequently observe damage from wind, yet wind was not the proximate cause. Proximate cause is a causal loss that starts a chain of events off. We could go all the way back to its installation, or it could be something that occurred in that moment. It could be all the way from us rolling the ball down the hill, or it could be the guy that picked it up in the middle of the hill and threw it through the window. The guy in the middle of the hill is the primary cause of loss. The damage to the window would not have occurred if not but for that guy. But it also wouldn't have occurred if you hadn't rolled the ball down the window or down the hill. But if that guy is taken out of that chain of events, the ball would continue rolling down the hill. And it would be fine. The glass would never break. So you rolling it down the hill, you're not the proximate cause. The guy picking it up and throwing it through the window is. Keep that in mind, and I'll explain a little bit more in a second. They are calling it damage from wind, and then they're saying it's not the proximate cause. In fact, they're saying that wind is just the straw that broke the camel's back. Yeah, all the previous straws placed on its back were the real proximate cause. That's interesting. This is from that same white paper. Here's a roof that has a racking method going up, and they're saying that unless a contractor takes the time and makes the extra effort to hand seal each strenuously uplifted shingle tab. Remember, these are engineers. They're very weak, so it does take a lot of effort to lift a tab up to put that final nail in. But they're saying that they have to take the extra time to hand seal those. Does anybody know any manufacturer of shingles that requires you to hand seal shingles when you install them with the racking method? None of them do. It's not a requirement. It isn't necessary. And it isn't strenuously uplifted. They're 3 tabs. They're freaking light. You lift a tab up, you put a nail in, you put it back down, put the nail in. If you guys have ever installed a roof, it's simple. Unfortunately, since the practice of hand sealing is time-consuming and laborious, it rarely occurs, resulting in most vertically racked roofs being inherently prone to damage from otherwise undamaging winds. Roofs that have also become damaged from wind due to poor practice of the roofing contractor. The lack of damages to the roof's rake, ridge, corners, and eaves clearly indicates that it's the contractor's practice, not the wind, which is the proximate cause of the loss. Wind came through. They call it undamaging winds. When is wind damaging winds? What speed? To be honest, what's the rule of thumb? Some carriers say 60. NOAA says that a thunderstorm becomes a severe thunderstorm at 58 miles per hour. Supposedly that's damaging winds. But honestly, a wind that causes damage is a damaging wind, even if it's 10 miles per hour. But when they say undamaging winds, what they mean to say is it's less than what their threshold would normally be that would normally cause damage. So less than, let's say, 60. But it's the contractor's practice of not going above and beyond in hand sealing that is causing this damage, not the wind, according to Donan. Yeah?
Are they testing that on brand new CO shingles, instead of 10, 20-year-old shingles?
Probably. So all the wind testing that has to do with the classifications and stuff, that's all new shingles, in order to be able to say that when they install it at that moment, it meets Class H ratings or something along those lines. So yeah, most of it. It's hard. They do. I'm not going to go down that path. It's a whole gambit. We could talk about it in my booth, though. Come on by. There's a lot there. High nailing is therefore a major cause of wind damage, frequently from winds that would have been otherwise undamaging. This word undamaging is important. So they're calling it wind damage, but they're saying that it's caused by high nailing. So what they're actually saying, and what I've been telling you so far today, what they're actually saying is wear and tear or improper installation might be the proximate cause that allowed undamaging winds to come through. But the engineers are taught in that same manual from that other thing only to name the proximate cause. They're only required to name the proximate cause of loss. So if they think the proximate cause is wear and tear, then they say that's not wind, that's wear and tear. What they aren't telling you is that other causes of loss are acting concurrently with that wear and tear to cause the loss. And so you just got to get them to talk about the other things that are happening too. And you can do that by saying it first. This roof is old as hell. And that's what allowed undamaging hail or undamaging winds to come through and cause damage. And then they have to investigate it. Because they only have to investigate what's claimed, you have to claim it. If they do not find damage at the eaves, rakes, or ridges, and they find it anywhere else, they're going to say it must be because either the roof is old, or the roof is defective, or it had installation issues. And that's what they're going to say is approximate cause. So if you don't have damage to the eaves, rakes, or ridges, but you have it somewhere else, they're going to say wear and tear, improper installation, things along those lines. And it's going to piss you off. But now you know that you should be hearing improper installation or the defective shingles started the chain of events off, and then non-damaging wind came through and caused damage. And that's what they're actually saying. And you don't have to fight against it. You don't have to say, no, you're wrong, it's not wear and tear, it's wind. You can say, hey, I think you're right. This roof is old. This roof definitely was installed wrong. That's probably why the undamaging winds were able to cause damage to an area that normally wouldn't have been damaged first, right? And they'll say, yeah, because that's what they're saying. If you could get them to say that second part, you're fine. And you win. If you say it first, you win. The loose shingles occurring due to normal wear and tear are simply being displaced by winds and then erroneously identified as being damaged by wind. If shingles are displaced by wind, then they're being damaged by wind. Whatever. We now know that that's because it didn't happen at the eaves, rakes, and ridges as well. Or it was improperly installed, or the wind speeds weren't quite strong enough to cause damage to a normally otherwise sound roof. And therefore, it must be something else involved that started the chain of events off. Do you see how they think? And once they say that one proximate cause, and then they stop talking and don't say anything about the wind, then the insurance company can say, wait a minute, engineer said it wasn't wind. It's actually wear and tear. Here's the exclusion for wear and tear. We're denying your claim. And then it's over. What do you do? Got to get a PA involved, got to get an attorney involved. It's hard to overcome as a contractor at that point. You can avoid it by saying what happened and including the wear and tear in your argument too. Don't hide from wear and tear or improper installation. Be the first one to say something about it. Whoever says it first wins. This roof was installed poorly. There is overdriven nails all over it. Look at all the slide out. Undamaging winds were able to come through and pull these shingles out because the roof was so poorly installed. Yeah.
Does zippering constitute wind damage?
It depends. Zippering, it depends on what you mean by zippering. True zippering looks more like that racked roof. And they call it zippering because it actually looks like a literal zipper going straight up a roof, unzipped. But when some people call zippering just loose corners, if it's going up the rack but it's all loose corners, that can be expansion contraction only. But it will make the roof more susceptible to a subsequent windstorm that can then get that corner that's already loose because of expansion contraction and then rip it off. So if you have actual damage to the shingles other than just being loose, then you have a chance of winning that. So you have to look under the shingles and look at the nail zones and see if it's been ripped up off the nail. Sometimes you cannot see it when it lays back down. You have to look under it at the nail to see if it's been damaged. You'll win them then. All of this, everything I'm talking about is in these courses that's on this thing for free for you guys for 30 days. We get deep on shit. You can win this. You can overcome the wear and tear, the improper installation argument just by being the first one to say it. You know what? Look how beautiful it is. That guy's awesome. I like that guy. So this is just an example of the Building Experts Institute hail identification courses. That was a commercial for it. I also do a monthly webinar. Most of what I talked to you about today comes from this class that I'm doing this coming Friday live on Zoom. It's normally $650. If you guys buy it while you're at the convention, it's $150 off, so it's only $500 using that QR code. You can get this QR code at my booth as well. You can scan that other one to get free 30 days for all the pre-recorded, go at your own pace courses that are on there. We also have Xactimate certification courses, levels 1, 2, and 3, all for the same $109 a month. So you don't have to spend $3,000 per person anymore. And all of this is very detailed and chapterized and easy to go back and watch as needed. You guys can start winning against the engineers with the class that's on there. You can identify stuff a little bit better so it all gets approved up front and avoid all those denials. Do you guys have any questions for me? Cool. Thank you.